On the surface, the idea of famous racehorses being reborn as anime girls who run races and then perform idol concerts is a little strange. But the franchise Umamusume Pretty Derby has become a massive cultural phenomenon. And right at the heart of it all is its original main character, a cheerful, endlessly hungry girl from the countryside named 𝗖cie𝗽𝗆𝗆𝗵𝘁, or Special Week. She might seem like your typical upbeat protagonist, but the real secret to her character and the reason she was chosen to launch this entire universe is that her story isn't really a work of fiction. What makes her so compelling is that the creators didn't have to invent a perfect hero's journey for her, they just had to find one that had already played out year by year on the racetracks of Japan. This is the story of how a real-life legend became the blueprint for an anime icon. This is the story of Special Week. So to really get why this character works and why she was chosen as the face of the franchise, you have to look at the actual horse. Because the story of the real Special Week isn't just a list of wins and losses. It is almost suspiciously well written. If you handed this horse's life story to a movie producer, they would probably tell you it was a little too little on the nose. It starts with the most classic element of any hero's journey, a tragic origin. His mother, a horse named Campaign Girl, passed away just 3 days after he was born. This left him as an orphan, having to be hand-fed by the farm staff just to survive. Now, an orphan story is already compelling, but it gets more specific. He was given a surrogate mother to raise him, which is common. What wasn't common was the surrogate they chose. She wasn't another thoroughbred, one of those sleek, elite race horses. She was a draft horse. Think of a big, sturdy horse used for farm work. That was his mom. So from his earliest days, he was an outsider. He was raised in a different environment by a mother of a completely different kind, away from the herds of other future champions. The creators of the anime didn't have to invent a compelling backstory about an outsider from the countryside trying to make it in the big city. They just had to copy and paste from reality, quite literally. Then you look at his family tree, what's called a pedigree in the horse world. It also reads like a perfect setup. His father, or sire, was a horse named Sunday Silence. To put it simply, he was an American champion who came to Japan and became the most dominant and important father of racehorses in the country's history. Being his son meant you were basically born into racing royalty, with massive expectations on your shoulders. But his mother's side of the family was pure Japanese racing legacy. Her family line traced all the way back to a very important ancestor named Shiraoki, a foundational mare, meaning she was like a great-great-grandmother of a whole dynasty of Japanese winners. So you have this perfect fusion in his blood. The incredible power and speed from his legendary American father mixed with the deep history and stamina of a famous native Japanese family. It is a ready-made narrative of two worlds colliding to create something special. Or should I say, Special Week? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
And that story arc pays off at the absolute peak of his career in the 1999 Japan Cup. The Japan Cup is a huge international race where Japan's best goes up against the top horses from all over the world. That year, the big challenger was a horse from Europe named Montjeu, who was considered the best in the world at the time. The stage was set for a classic us versus them showdown, and Special Week delivered. He won decisively, but the moment that cemented his legend wasn't just crossing the finish line, it was what his jockey, the famous Yutaka, said afterwards. He declared that he was proud to be Japanese. It turned a horse race into a moment of national pride. The orphan, born from this perfect blend of domestic and foreign blood, had defended Japan's honor on the world stage. You cannot write a better climax than that. A horse with a storybook beginning had a storybook peak. But a hero isn't just defined by their greatest wins. In many ways, they are defined by their adversaries and the moments they fall short. Special Week raced in an era that became known as the Golden Generation, which is just a way of saying he was surrounded by a particularly talented and competitive group of horses. His story is completely tangled up with theirs. You had rivals like Seiun Sky, for example. He was a classic frontrunner, meaning his strategy was just to sprint to the lead right from the start and dare everyone else to catch him. This style gave Special Week a lot of trouble, and Seiun Sky actually beat him in 2 of the 3 races that make up Japan's Triple Crown. crown, which are the most important races for any 3-year-old horse. So right away, the idea that Special Week was some unstoppable force is off the table. He had clear challenges he couldn't always overcome, but his ultimate rival, his true nemesis, was another horse named Grass Wonder. The history between them is simple and brutal. Special Week never once beat Grass Wonder. In their 2 biggest races against each other, Grass Wonder won both. And there's people out there saying touching grass is an easy thing. And their final showdown is the most critical event in Special Week's entire history. It was the 1999 Arima Kinen. This was the last race of his career, and also the last race of Grass Wonder's career. The final battle. The story couldn't be more perfectly set up. The race ends in one of the closest photo finishes you will ever see. 4 horses hit the line at almost the exact same time, and after a long review, the win was given to Grass Wonder. The margin of victory was later measured to be just 4 centimeters. 4 centimeters. It is the ultimate bittersweet ending. In the final moment of his spectacular career, he is denied his storybook victory against his greatest foe by the smallest possible margin. He retired with an unresolved goal, a final challenge that he failed to meet. And this single loose thread, this dramatic, painful, unresolved loss, is the most important piece of narrative fuel the creators of Umamusume had. It is the ultimate what if, and as we will see, they would build their entire fantasy around answering that question. So you have this incredible life story, the tragic birth of an underdog journey, the climactic wins, and the heartbreaking final defeat. How do you turn all of that into a single, relatable anime character? Well, you translate it very carefully, piece by piece. Let's start with her core motivation in the anime, her promise to become the best Umamusume in Japan for her 2 mothers. This isn't a random anime trope. It is a direct and frankly masterful adaptation of his real-life origin. The deceased birth mother in the show is his real mother, the horse campaign girl, and the kind human mother from the countryside who raises her. She is the stand-in for that surrogate draft horse and the human farmhands who actually raised the orphan. The creators took the core emotional truth of his birth, being an orphan raised by a different kind of mother, and made it the entire reason for the character's journey. It is a really sad backstory, but it is also her purpose. Once you have the motivation, you have the design of the character, and again, nothing is accidental. Her appearance is basically a visual biography. Take a look at her outfit. The prominent purple zigzag pattern on her skirt isn't a random design choice. It is pulled directly from the silks. That's the colorful uniform the jockey wears, of her main real-life jockey, Yutaka. And then you have the 2 little golden clover medals that she wears on her top. Those represent her 4 biggest victories, what are called the grade 1 races. She is quite literally wearing the history of the horse she is based on. Every key part of her legacy is encoded right there in her design for anyone who knows where to look. But then you have the parts that are pure fiction. The most famous thing about the character of Special Week is probably her personality, right? She is cheerful, a little bit naive, and then she eats a lot. She is constantly thinking about food, especially carrots and giant bowls of rice. Yo, this horse is very expensive to maintain, and the real horse was not really known for this. This trait is a complete invention. So why add it? Well, it serves a clear purpose. It makes her more relatable, more human. It provides some much needed comedic relief to balance out the very intense trauma of the races. It gives her a simple, endearing quirk that keeps her from being a one-dimensional, I wanna be the very best protagonist. But now that I think about it, almost every shonen protagonist loves eating. So maybe it's trying to pander to that as well. I mean, anyways, it is calculated choice by the writers to make her a more well-rounded and likable character, right? And it clearly works. So what am I to say? And this careful blend of translated fact and functional fiction that creates the final product. But building the character is only half of the battle. You also have to adapt her actual career, with all of its triumphs and failures. And I think this is where Umamusume Project shows its real genius. It retells the story, but it also actively engages with it. And in the most important moments, it rewrites it. The first and most significant example of this is in the anime, with the character Silent Suzuka. The real horse Silent Suzuka is a legend in his own right, but his story ends in tragedy. In the 1998 Tenno show race, he suffered a severe leg injury that was so catastrophic he had to be put down on the track. It is one of the most infamous and heartbreaking moments in the sport's history. The anime recreates this race. The injury happens. It is a tense, awful moment. But then they make one crucial change. She survives. I think this is way better than a sad ending. They deliberately transformed this historical tragedy into a story about hope. Suzuka's long, painful rehab becomes becomes the central emotional challenge of the first season. It becomes the thing that forces Special Week to grow up and find a deeper reason to run. They took a real-world tragedy and turned it into a narrative pillar of resilience. It is a powerful what if, but the game takes this idea of rewriting history one step further. It gives the power to the player. The main story in the game builds towards that final fateful race we talked about, the 1999 Arima Kinen. The race the real Special Week lost to his nemesis, Grass Wonder, by just 4 centimeters, right? The ultimate unresolved goal. When you get to this race in the game, it is the final challenge. And if you just play it out normally, you lose. History stays as it was. But if you have met certain difficult conditions as a player, if you have put in the work, something different happens. A special what-if scenario unlocks. The scene plays out, the final stretch of the race. As the main theme song begins to swell, the camera focuses on Special Week. The words, "Japan's Supreme Commander," flash across the screen as she surges forward past Grass Wonder. Or at least that is what the editor of this video is gonna do for you. This is an incredibly sophisticated way to tell a story. All the tension was built by the real-world history. All in the emotional weight comes from knowing about that 4-centimeter loss. And the final triumphant release, the Cartasis, is delivered through your direct interaction as a player. The game lets you watch the story and it lets you finish it. And that philosophy is the key to all of this. The story of Special Week, both the horse and the character, endures because it was a fundamentally perfect narrative from the very beginning. It already had all of the classic elements a writer could ask for. The tragic origin, the underdog rising against the elite, the sting of an unresolved rivalry, and that final triumphant moment on the world stage. The genius of Umamusume creators wasn't that they had to invent a great story, it was that they recognized one that already existed in the real world. And they understood exactly how to translate it. They knew which parts of history to honor, which real-life tragedies to rewrite for the sake of a more hopeful emotional journey, and most importantly, which defeats to leave unresolved, so that the audience could be the one to finally claim the victory themselves. And in the end, Special Week serves as the perfect bridge. She connects the factual, sometimes complicated world of horse racing history with a simple, emotional, character-driven world out of anime. Her legend was born in the turf, but it was immortalized on the screen. And that is the end of the video, but let me know what you all think. That is all from me, 𝗖cie𝗽𝘆𝗵𝗁, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers!